So let's get going. So first of all, everybody, a warm hello, quite literally a warm hello, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us over your lunch hour when you could be possibly doing other bits and pieces. Hopefully this will be time well spent. This is the third report that's come off a series of reports that we've run this summer. It's part of the Hays What Workers Want series. And today we're going to be focusing on the approaches that employers are taking when it comes to the recruitment and retention of older workers, and some of the commonly shared experiences and perceptions around this community. Employees over the age of 50, on the face of it, should be a crucial part of today's workforce, bringing a unique set of experiences, perspectives, and skills to an organization, its workforce, its workplace, and colleagues around them. However, notably, since the pandemic, there has been a reported rise in the number of over 50s who are leaving the workforce. Often cited reasons for doing so are varied, including long-term health conditions, caring responsibilities, or perhaps not being able to find a job that continues to tick the boxes that are either wanted or needed. The economic penalty linked to the disproportionate exodus of this older worker community from the workforce has prompted the government in particular to get behind initiatives designed to encourage, attract, and retain over 50s in work. Linked to this, we wanted to find out what matters most to employees over the age of 50 when it comes to the workforce. So when surveying over 9,000 professionals and employers from across the UK, we were very keen to discover their views, which are summarised in this part of the What Workers Want series, the Older Workers Report. So today we'll be taking you through some of the key findings and sharing some ideas to help you create an inclusive environment that maximizes the potential of your entire workforce, together with tips specifically to encourage older workers themselves to make the most of their working environment. So just before I come on to who's joining me today, if we could just change the screen, thank you. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded, and a copy of the link will be sent to everybody on today's call. We will have time for questions. I hope we'll cover quite a lot of areas during the body of the webinar and the insights we'll be sharing with you. But we will have time for questions, so please do feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will pick up as many of them as possible, and if we can't get round to everybody's questions, we will have a look at them and see whether we can come back to you individually. So first of all, let me just introduce myself and our guest speakers today. My name is Yvonne Smythe, and I'm the National Specialism Director for HR and Legal here at Hays. I'm also one of the lead practitioners around our DE&I practice. I'm delighted to be joined by two guests. My first guest is Emily Andrews, the Deputy Director for Work at the Centre for Ageing Better. Emily leads Ageing Better's work to create equitable access to work for people in their 50s and 60s. She heads up their work action area team, which delivers the age-friendly employer pledge. Lots of resources coming from Emily later, actually. Various projects to improve the quality of employment support for over 50s, and all of their policy and influencing work, which is significant, relating to employment and older workers. Also joining us today is Josie Davies, a colleague of mine. Josie is a career coach at Hays Career Transition Services. Josie has spent over 10 years coaching people from a wide variety of sectors, ranging from charities, NHS, government, and commercial and banking organisations. She successfully supports many individuals in achieving their career goals and transitioning between roles with more calm and ease. So thank you to both of you for joining us. And we'll be getting into a conversation with you a little bit later on. But first of all, I would just like to do a bit of a scene set by taking you through some of the key highlights from our What Workers Want Older Workers report. So First of all, and we'll be picking up on some of these themes in our discussion. One of the things that we set out to investigate during the survey and the report we've consequently put together was how many organisations are actively hiring over 50s. Our research shows that nearly a quarter of employers are not actively recruiting older workers, and a similar proportion were not sure if their organisation was actually doing so. So my first challenge is surely this is an avenue for almost half employers, therefore, to explore why that is and how they can best navigate and operate with what continues to be a talent and skills short market that we're working in at the moment. So potentially an under-optimized talent pool. Next slide, please. Our report also takes a look at what matters most to over 50s at work. Flexible working options are very important to older workers. Over 65% of over 50s value flexible working opportunities. Taking a closer look at these preferences on your screen, the most popular preferred way of working is agile working or flexi-time at 52%, followed by a 4-day working week at 51%. Almost half, 47%, want to work fully remotely. So I'm interested in exploring that with Emily a little bit further. And another 47% wish to have some type of hybrid working hours in their roles. And as I say, we'll be taking a look at how this can operationally be supported in our later discussion. However, whilst over 65% of over 50s value the flexible working opportunity, whichever way is cast, when they're considering a new role, just 45% of employers say they offer these options to their workers. So once again, a potential missed opportunity. Next slide, please. Aside from flexible working opportunities, other factors that are important to over 50s when considering a new role include health insurance, flexible leave policies, retirement planning support, and training opportunities. Again, we'll be taking a closer look at these in our discussion. Next slide, please. The last data point I'd like to touch on just for now from our report is the impact of ageism in the recruitment process. We're going to take a look at how ageism most commonly manifests itself during a recruitment process, during our discussion, and how this could be mitigated. But I think the importance of taking the time to do this is because our findings show that 88% of older workers believe it is important for organisations to have taken action to mitigate this ageism during the recruiting process. But again, just only half of employers, 52%, say they have taken active steps to consider and address this. The impact of this is significant. Our research shows that nearly 6 out of 10 older workers would be less likely to accept a job offer from an organisation that wasn't seen to be taking action to mitigate ageism during the hiring process. Again, something we'll be taking a closer look at. Other steps that older workers would consider taking would include withdrawing their job application altogether, raising their concerns with the hiring organisation, or indeed, from a brand perspective, potentially sharing their concerns on online review sites. So a reputational issue there. Next slide, please. So this is just a sample of some of the findings from our research by way of a scene set. The full report contains a lot more insights into what matters most to employees over the age of 50, as well as lots of recommendations for organisations to better attract and retain older, experienced workers. The report will be available to you to access on our website via the link on the screen after today's webinar. So please do go and have a look if you're interested. Also, we'll send you a link in the follow-up materials that we send through to you. So let's now move into a more detailed look at some of the themes that I've started to touch on with both Emily and Josie. So let's move into the discussion here. And once again, Emily and Josie, thank you for joining me this morning or this afternoon now. So we're going to look at 4 areas in our discussion today. The first area is going to be around the value represented by older workers. The second area is going to be on the value placed on flexible working practices when it comes to attracting and retaining older workers, and how to really make sure how to operationalize that. Third element is going to be the importance around the mindset of embracing lifelong learning, and really the necessity of doing that in today's world of work. And the fourth area we're going to have a look at is ageism in the recruitment process and indeed in the workplace. So let us have a look at theme 1. So looking at the value of this potentially underrepresented and underutilized talent pool, you may recall that our research shows that nearly a quarter of employees, 21%, admitted that they weren't hiring workers, and that 24% of organizations said they weren't too sure whether what they were doing around this particular kind of talent pool from a hiring perspective. So by way of additional insight to that, it's interesting that public sector organisations are more likely to be actively hiring older workers. So 60% of public sector organisations are actively looking at this space, to just over half, 51% of private sector organisations. So a bit of kind of nuancing in there. So Emily, finally, coming to you. Could you just share with us, in your experience, what are the benefits to an organisation of actively engaging with workers over the age of 50, and how can they help drive success in today's workplace?
Okay, thank you so much, Vaughan. So we are a charity, just to say that so you all understand the kind of this perspective I'm coming from. We're an independent charity funded by the National Lottery Community Fund, and we're working to create fair access to work for people in their 50s and 60s. And, you know, it's really nice as a charity worker, excuse me, to work on an issue that's kind of such a no-brainer. We are in a situation where around, you know, we've got organizations are facing skills challenges, they're facing labor shortages. We know we've got people who want to hire, and you know, a lot of the employers who come to us who've joined our network, our over 200 strong network in the Age Friendly Employer Pledge, you know, they're coming to us because they need to hire, and they want to know how to reach out to a different group of people. So we've got these challenges. There are also many people in this age cohort who are not in work and would like to be, and I think there's also many people in this age cohort who say, yeah, I'm happy not being in work, but if the right opportunity came along, if the workplace, you know, they had more positive experiences in the workplace, might be more tempted to come back in. So you've got a gap, and you've got a group of people who can fill that gap. But actually, on top of that, what the research shows is that there are huge benefits to a workforce of having access to workers in their 50s and 60s. So OECD research shows that workers with a 10% higher proportion of workers over 50 are 1.1% more productive. And those productivity gains are coming from a few different places. So it comes from low turnover is certainly part of that. Although if I had my way, there would be higher turnover amongst workers in their 50s and 60s, because we'd feel more confident about moving around the labour market when we get to that age. Low turnover is definitely contributing to productivity. And also, of course, you've got skills and experience kind of transfers between the generations. And that's not just kind of specialist skills, because it's also just the skills of being in the workforce, the soft skills that whatever we're doing, however we move through the workforce as we get older, those continue to develop. So if we upskill in a new area, or we even reskill into a totally new job in our 50s and 60s, which we're going to come on and talk about, we're still going to bring those soft skills with us that we've developed over our working life, which then will get transferred to kind of younger parts of the workforce. And that's my other favorite piece of research around this, which shows that if you want innovation within a workplace, it is multi-generational workforces that will bring that to you. So it's when you bring older and younger workers together that you get the kind of the best innovation kind of outcomes. So yeah.
That's good. I'll take that. Thank you. And it's interesting because we will come on to how to encourage this practice to become more and more normalized, because at the moment I think it's still seen as a bit of an outlier. There are all sorts of dynamics in the world of work, particularly around skills shortages and the advent of new jobs, etc., that are going to require people to be reskilling and refocusing, and people will have 2 or 3 careers as they progress through, if not multiples. But it's still relative. It feels like it's relatively early doors. And I know that, for example, there are some well-documented examples of customer service type roles in the likes of B&Q and Boots, where you're mirroring your customer demographic, and you're having therefore more meaningful engagement, etc. But the more of those we can get out, the better it will be, won't it? Because I do think there's an element of kind of comfort and safety in numbers. I think it's just a matter of time, and that's one of the reasons that we really wanted to start to advocate for this particular area and to support the kind of work that you're doing. Just looking at some of the typical connector points that are made when we look at, again, the value and the contribution that older workers can bring to a wider workforce. 2 of the most commonly referenced ones are knowledge transfer and the opportunity to mentor and kind of put the ladder down to the next generation kind of coming up, and making sure that that ecosystem is working in the kind of way that you suggest. To what extent do you see that being used to good effect within organizations, those 2 areas in particular?
I think, okay, so they're kind of all part and parcel of the same thing, aren't they? Kind of like knowledge transfer, that kind of mentorship thing. And I think the kind of sectors where we see that's really going best are actually the sectors who were kind of already waking up to workforce challenges quite a long time ago. So if you think about sectors like construction, for example, where in the construction you've actually had an aging workforce, you haven't had as many younger workers coming in, and there I would say, actually, interestingly, while you'd think of construction as being a kind of very hostile environment for people, as to work in as you get older, doing these very manual jobs, it's going to be very hard. Actually, there's a kind of I hear anecdotally of examples in construction where you've got kind of that employers are working quite hard to retain the skills of experienced workers as they get older, so that they can pass them on to so that they can help to upskill a next generation that they're really going to need to get into the workforce. But what I would also say is that we're really missing a trick if we frame, and I did it a little bit myself, I'll admit, we're really missing a trick if we frame the value of having more workers in their 50s and 60s in the workforce as, well, they can get the next generation sorted out because they're the ones that really matter. Let us remind ourselves that currently we live in a country where the state pension age is 66. Working in our 60s is going to be the norm, and we have a lot to contribute that isn't just helping other people do their jobs better, although of course that is a huge amount of what we can contribute. But I think being the ability to kind of upskill, learn new things has been massively downplayed, and I think we're getting a bit more of a groundswell of people being like, well, you've seen when you've had more experience and you've seen things, it gives you the opportunity to have really new ideas, not just transfer the knowledge that you've had, but to really actually innovate in a way that's based on experience, to kind of be based on new ideas. And so we need to actually think about, it's not just, oh, okay, someone can go into a mentorship role, but also someone can contribute new things. And when we talk about learning and development, and we're going to kind of talk about that in a minute, I think that this knowledge transfer piece, I think we also need to think of it as a way of upskilling, like people on both sides of that relationship. It's not just the matter of someone who's been experienced in a long time in a job is kind of like upskilling the person who's less experienced. There's always an exchange there, right? Mentoring allows us to get better in our role when we have to explain it to someone else, but also there might be new skills that the mentee has that can then kind of upskill. And I think the more we set these up as a kind of mutual exchange relationship, that's where we're going to see the best value.
Certainly. And actually, I'm going to shift my order now, because I'm actually going to come on to the whole learning mindset and skills. It's interesting, just 100-year life, please God, for a number of us, most of us. I think it's absolutely, it's I'm going to have to continue working. Therefore, I'd like the world of work to be, embracing me, and also it's two-way street. I think this is going to be interesting, this next section, because there is a piece around the mindset here as well. So let's have a look at the importance of lifelong learning, skills, kind of L&D side of things. So again, going back to the report, our report showed that less than a quarter, this shocked me actually, less than a quarter of older workers think that training opportunities are important when considering a new role, despite the fact that many employers have woken up to this, both, certainly in terms of utilization of their own workforce and productivity and skills gaps, etc. So despite 42% of employers offering this to workers. And again, and I'm conscious this is slightly ladder down, but let me just mention, just 7% of older workers are keen to take advantage of mentorship opportunities. Now, let's just remember that mentorship is a two-way street. You can have reverse mentoring as well. So that, I think, again, was a bit surprising, despite 16% of employers having fairly structured mentoring schemes in their organizations. So there's an interesting gap here between what organizations are actually offering their workforces in terms of training compared to what older workers appear to be valuing. And again, just for context, in such a rapidly evolving world of work, lifelong learning is going to be pretty critical to ensure that we all stay, relevant to the roles that are not just here today, but are here, in the future. So I'm going to start with Emily, then I'm going to come on to Josie. So Emily, how can employers, in terms of this reframe that clearly needs some work on, how can employers better communicate not only what's on offer to their older workforce, but also demonstrate the value of taking up the training opportunities that are there and available?
So my first answer to this question, this is what I always say around this issue and around this puzzle, around the fact that training and development really falls off a cliff in our 50s and 60s, is if you feel like you're putting an offer out and people aren't taking it up, ask why. That's got to be your first port of call, right? And so that would be my first thing, is that you've got to find out what's going on in your organization. Some suggestions of what might be going on in your organization are that it may be that there's a kind of, you haven't got the cultural shift where there's still an assumption in your workforce that training is for younger people. So in that case, you've got to be really explicit when you promote your opportunities. This is available to everyone. We're really keen to have people in every generation of every age taking up these opportunities. So just really actively marketing it. You've also then, and again, this becomes a culture piece. Funny enough, I was just reading a study the other day around where there was HR people being really confused about why training opportunities weren't being taken up, and then older workers themselves reporting that their line managers were prioritizing quite explicitly younger workers for those training opportunities because it was seen as there's scarcity, and these opportunities were seen as being, oh well, it's supposed to be for younger people, forgetting that someone who's 55 has got may well have another 15-20 years in the workforce left to go, right? And you wouldn't accept 20 years without training when you were 25. You shouldn't. So you've got to ask yourself what's going on in your culture. Is that kind of prioritization going on? Is there this understanding that it's not that training and dynamism are happening at all ages? And then you've also got, I think, to look at what your training offer is, because again, training offers are so often kind of mirror a sort of classroom-based experience, right? A kind of school-based offer. And those can become more alienating for us as we get older. The longer we've been away from the classroom, particularly if we've had bad experiences in the classroom, or now they're often online, but it's that similar kind of thing. And actually what our experience suggests, what our research suggests to us in all of the co-design work that we've done, is that often, and this is true actually not just when we're in our 50s and 60s, but as we progress through the workforce, we want to be able to understand new things by doing them. We want to be able to experience them. We want to be able to try them out. We want to be able to see them for ourselves and help understand how that relates to our own experience. So training might not look like put someone in a webinar, or at least it might not look like the first. Does it look like job shadowing? So that someone can see what it looks like and imagine themselves in that role? Does it look like, giving someone an opportunity to have a go at a task that might be in a different job role or kind of within a skill set that you'd like them to go? Does it involve kind of like, allowing them to meet up with people? It's all of those things, I think, first to help us kind of like see ourselves in doing those kinds of new things before you can then put someone in the formal training. I think if you just say to someone, well, why aren't you doing the training course? You've got to kind of help people get to that training course. And then the third thing that I would say is about risk is, again, we haven't talked about ageism yet, we will, but the risk, the risk calculations that we make when it comes to thinking about moving jobs, moving skills, training skills, they do get more challenging as we get older. We're worried that actually, if I get these new skills, will there be a job available to me? Will anyone give me opportunities if I gain these new skills? Will I really, or will I be seen as too old? So again, it's about, if you've got it's about kind of resetting your culture to make sure that across the board opportunities are being offered to people. People are, you've got role models in your organization that you can point to of people who've been given new opportunities to develop new skills within an organization. And it's, if you do that, if you can demonstrate it, that will start to shift your culture and demonstrate your culture, which will then help people feel it's worth making the risk of taking on new training opportunities.
Thank you. No, that's good. That's good. You've already signposted what's coming down the line, so I love it. Josie, you do a lot of work supporting individuals who are transitioning across careers, across organizations, as part of the career transition team that we have here at Hays. And can you just talk to us from what you see with your clients on how this kind of affects or impacts the kind of mindset and approach when it comes to job searching and individual job searching, going back to Emily's point around, am I going to hit a brick wall here?
Yeah. So it's interesting what Emily said, actually, piggybacking off what Emily said. Anecdotally, I've spoken to my clients, and these are 55 plus category of clients, and they say that they are all for training. So I was quite surprised to see that it's not something that's being embraced statistically. And the reason why sometimes I hear that they are all for training, but it doesn't necessarily happen, is partly sometimes it's not seen as a priority. The training is available to them, but they're not actually given time to take out of their work to embark on some kind of training course, or they're directed to some e-learning course, but that isn't the best form of learning for them. So it is quite interesting what Emily said about experiential learning versus kind of like that kind of digital learning, especially if they're perhaps early experience in a classroom basis wasn't a good one. So I do think that from my experience of speaking to my clients, they are all for training, but there needs to be perhaps more of a priority to focus on training. And also, if employers incorporate that within their appraisals even, and talk about the relevance of training, because sometimes you're directed to training, but they don't necessarily see, how does this help benefit my role? So if there's a clear communication on, this will help enhance your skills in this way, and giving the time to train, I think that would help benefit the individuals.
Thanks, Josie. And again, just picking up on this theme of skills and relevancy and frankly transferability as well. One of the things that you do with your clients is that you tend to look at a kind of a skills and kind of qualities audit and help them almost reframe what they bring to a new role or the kind of world of work. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So sometimes I have clients who have worked within the organization for a significant amount of time. So it could be for over 30 years in the same organization. And because they become an expert, it's referred to as unconscious competence, where they do the job automatically. They don't recognize their skills. It can be really hard for them to identify their skills. So actually taking a step back to think about what skills, what strengths do I have, what qualities make me who I am, can reassure them of what their capabilities are, because sometimes they will devalue themselves because they think, I just do my job. That's what I do, because they can't see that actually they've gained a certain set of skills because they've become such an expert at what they do. It's really hard. It becomes automatic. And so one method is to help them by identifying where they've demonstrated resilience and getting to think about, when they demonstrated resilience, what mindset did they have at the time? What skills did they demonstrate? What qualities they possess? Because they've successfully overcome a challenge. And so that's one way. Another approach is to ask family and friends, and even create an anonymous survey, which you send out to people you trust and say, what do you value about me? What skills would you say I possess? So you collate data, and then it would be seen as more impartial, because sometimes it's hard to see for yourself what you're good at. And another approach is to identify what are the tasks that you do. So if we take, for example, an administrator job, the task for an administrator might be typing letters, typing reports, for example. And then moving on to skills and strengths. What skills and strengths have they acquired in relation to that particular task? So for example, if you're typing, you probably demonstrate IT skills, accuracy, attention to detail. And then moving on to the third piece is, what is the result, benefit, and outcome? And the result, benefit, or outcome of typing is the fact that you could type up reports quickly, you could help benefit the team by producing things very quickly within a certain time frame. So that can be really useful as an audit to begin with, to identify your set of skills currently. But on a wider level, it is important to think holistically, what are the skills this individual or the qualities they've gained throughout their whole lifetime, not just in relation to their careers. Because even outside of work, even during COVID, for example, when everyone went out to buy flour and baking, they demonstrate creativity skills. So it's really useful to think about the skills you've acquired.
It's so interesting that you say that, because we have been working, because I mean, one of the things that everyone's very interested in now is like people who have left the workforce entirely, so they're not working and they're not looking for work, and we have been interested in that group since before it was cool. And we have co-designed a service in Greater Manchester with the Greater Manchester Port Authority, working with the Department for Work and Pensions, and a key part of that is a skills identification tool, which, again, specifically to make it work for people in this cohort, is broken down by decades. It's like actually supporting people to take a step back, because it just, our experience, the more we do, our experience just gets a bit overwhelming to us, and we can talk about how you can change your job applications to support people with that. When it comes to a skills identification tool, inviting people to think about everything you've done in every decade of your life can be a real way, in work and out of work, like you said, that can be a good way into that kind of classic skills identification process. And that will work really well for us as we get older.
And then just finally on that, how does that, once you've gone through that process of almost reframing yourself and really almost kind of deconstructing what you do to reconstruct yourself, what does that mean to confidence and kind of self-belief? Because that's one of the things that you'd commented on, wasn't it? That there tends to be a lack of confidence, self-confidence.
Yeah, so I do often have clients that say, I'm lacking confidence. It's a really common experience. And it can be hard for them to recognize their own self-worth, their self-esteem, especially if they've been doing the same job for a number of years. And so it is useful to kind of ask them specifically, in what context are you lacking in confidence? Because to say I'm lacking in confidence is quite a general statement, and there'll be certain contexts where they do feel confident, and it's really getting them to reassure them of their skills, their qualities. And I reassure people that you are unique. There's no one else like you. And it's about really exploring with them to identify what makes them tick, what their passions are, what their qualities and skills, and that helps boost their confidence level. The recognition is what a coach does, is in essence hold up a mirror to reflect back that person's skills and strengths, and also where they've also had to become resilient in times where it's been difficult. And that really has bolstered their confidence levels.
Lovely, thank you. Before I leave the topic of kind of skills and learning mindset and things, I just want to share a couple of things with our audience today and our guests. So we have recently launched a division in the Hays, which is our skills division, and it's a global, really exciting development for us. And employers are getting really enthusiastic about how we can support them in identifying talent pools and supporting individuals to reskill. One of the initial areas of focus were around technology related skills, perhaps not surprisingly, given there's such a talent shortage there. And so I just wanted to share a couple of examples actually of profiles of individuals and perhaps bust a couple of myths. So the work that we do, we support individuals, we fund them through basically skills training, put them into apprenticeship roles. There is a balloon payment at the end if they successfully complete, and we kind of use our apprenticeship levy to do that and to support. Interestingly, when we first started talking about this in our organisation on the part of employers, I think there was an assumption that it was young people who would be taking advantage of this as they're accessing the world of the work for the first time. We were particularly going for people who, were kind of furthest removed from the workforce. But interestingly, in running the programs and starting to kind of put cohorts through, these were for people who were reskilling and retraining to become cloud and security engineers. And we had a range of individuals in the cohort from, yes, an 18-year-old, but also to people in their late 40s and early 50s, including a postman who had been on his beat for many years and wanted to reset, and he was 48, and also a 52-year-old surgeon who just wanted to completely step away and do something different. Both have been, very successful and have brought all sorts of experience, and they're running alongside and with colleagues from the cohort with all sorts of different backgrounds. But I thought that was interesting, and fully embraced it. And also just ongoing at the moment, we're working with a mid-sized financial services organization who are going through a significant digital transformation. And therefore, there's going to be an impact on existing individuals in the organization and a need to kind of redeploy and reskill. And the roles that they need to boost are project management and business analyst type roles. And so they put a call out to the business, and they had almost, overnight, 150 expressions of interest from their existing employees. And now I know we're supporting them on actually how do we then, deliver that piece of work. But again, just, there's an appetite, there's a latent appetite there. We just have to make sure that when the opportunities are presented, whether it's learning development or whether it's, completely reskilling and internal redeployment, that we are looking at the entire workforce as opposed to just perhaps a default type community, i.e. those people who are earlier on in their careers. Thank you. I'm going to move to our third theme, which is around working practices and this very, very clear interest on flexible working and kind of operationalizing it. Now, this really follows on from the second part of our What Workers Want series. A number of you may have had it. If not, you could just download it. But basically, it's around working practices, whether it's full, part-time, flex, hybrid, etc. And particularly for the older workers, it's an area of very, very keen interest. And as I said, in the stats we provided earlier, 65% of individuals definitely want it as a kind of, a top priority, number 2 after competitive pay and rations. But only 45% of employers are actually offering this. So it feels like it's a particular of particular interest to this community. So again, questions to the panel. So Josie, just coming back to you first of all. So in your work as a career coach, what's the desired working pattern that people are talking to you about the most?
Yeah, so most of them want part-time hours, and that typically would look like 3 days a week. They are open to 4 days, but definitely part-time hours. And the reason being is the majority that they said to me, it might be that they have care responsibilities. So they could be caring for elderly members of the family, or they have someone once said granddad duties, for example. And it could also be some of them have a disability, a health condition that fluctuates, and so they need that part-time hours or flexible working in order so that they could manage their well-being whilst they're looking for work or working, because there is a desire for them to be in work. They often cite anecdotally, I want to be kept busy, I want to do something that gets me out of bed. And so it gives them a sense of purpose, and it helps them to feel like they're contributing to society. They don't want to completely finish working at all. They want to continue, but ideally in hours that suit them around their life priorities as well.
Yeah. So part-time is one of the things that comes up, which is obviously different to when we think of flex or hybrid. Sometimes those roles aren't part-time. So Emily, coming on to you. So do you want to kind of, or can I ask you to expand on that a little bit further in terms of particularly with your advocacy, what can employers do to ensure that they're meeting this demand for the right flexible working options to the older community in their workforce?
And I think this is a really good moment that gives us an opportunity to kind of just like zoom up a bit in terms of like, and, you know, Josie's kind of, you know, Josie's anecdote fits with all of the data, right? Because we're talking about older workers, we're talking about, and when I talk about older workers, I talk specifically about workers in their 50s and 60s. We had a question already in the Q&A about what about workers in their 70s, like absolutely is of interest. My specific charitable interest is in workers in their 50s and 60s, you know, allowing people to have the financial security to gain financial security from being in work until state pension age. And that's my particular interest. But workers in their 50s and 60s is a huge group of people, right? And in a sense, we get more unlike each other as we get older. It's an, you know, it's a totally heterogeneous group. But we don't have fair access to work broadly when we are in our 50s and 60s because of practical issues that are particularly likely to appear at this age, but can appear at any age and don't happen to everyone. And that is caring responsibilities, as we've heard, caring for parents, caring for spouses, caring for adult children with need, caring for grandchildren. You know, it's the peak time for caring being in this age cohort. And or having a long-term health condition and disability, which we are more likely to acquire as we get older, particularly those of us who have less money are more likely to be to acquire health conditions earlier. So we've got those practical things that prevent us from having fair access to work, and then there's also the attitudinal barriers around ageism, ageist attitudes towards other people, which limit the opportunities that we get given, and the internalized ageism, which is related to the confidence point around the opportunities that we think we deserve. But why flexible working is so kind of valuable is for this age cohort is that it hits so many of those buckets, just exactly as Josie said, right? That it hits supporting people with caring responsibilities, it supports people with long-term health conditions, and supports people who just want something different out of life. And it's really interesting. There was a survey done in 2015 that asked retired people what they most miss about work. And the number one thing was nothing. I miss nothing about work. But the number two thing was relationships, personal relationships at work. And that is, and when you come back to surveys that were done of people who left work during the pandemic, when people are asked what would bring you back to work, again, the number one thing is people say, well, if I need the money, but the number two thing is purpose, connection, relationship, something to do, basically those kind of like social type things. And the type of work that people said they want is flex. And again, I think it's really important that Josie's referenced part-time work here, because it's like the hard bit of flex is to challenge yourself, not to just be like, oh, can this job be done in compressed hours? Could it be done at slightly different hours? Could it be done at home? But actually, could we redesign some of these roles and think slightly differently about them, which means we can get hold of people? And again, I'll now talk about my experience. I really challenge myself when I'm recruiting to new jobs to try and see what is the minimum number of hours I think I could get this role covered for the right person. And you will get the most extraordinary applications from people who you would never think to get, people with amazing CVs will apply for your jobs if you're offering it 3 days a week. The way that you'll expand the talent pool, and then the amount that you can get out of that person in 3 days is incredible, right? Because they, you know, they know so much, they value so much, and then you've still got a bit of budget that we can maybe use to access capacity and capability elsewhere. So it's like, it's win-win-win really. In terms of what can employers do to like make that offer available, the good news is you don't need an older worker specific flexible work policy. So we did some work with Legal & General, with a large NHS hospital, to find out, you know, what really works to make this happen. You don't need an older worker specific flex work policy, you just need a good one. You need a reason neutral flexible work policy, and everyone needs to know that that flexible work policy is reason neutral, because again, you get lots of rumours or anecdotes, or people think that, oh, the only people who'll get a flex work request accepted are people who've got like childcare responsibilities. You've got to make really clear that that's not true, that you can, you know, request flexible work for all different reasons, and kind of monitor how much they're being taken up. You don't need an older worker specific policy, but it's worth promoting it to people and saying, look, flex work is available to everyone. If you want a slightly different pace of life, if you've got other things going on in your life, don't be, you know, if we want to keep you, we want to keep our staff, and if flexible work would help you continue to, you know, do your role, we're really keen to talk to you about that. Because I think, and it's the same with health adjustments. What can happen is that as we get older, and this is what our kind of surveys suggest, people in their 50s and 60s can get more reticent to request adjustments because they're worried that they will be met with, rather than with problem solving and with support, they'll be met with an attempt to shuffle them out. And you've got to make really clear that that's not what's going to happen.
Thank you. Yeah, properly inclusion, you know, for everyone, isn't it, on that? Yeah, thank you. So let's come on to ageism and how prevalent it is, and how do we tackle this? I've already spoken about, I won't go through the numbers again, but you know, there is clearly people who will be self-selecting out, and there's potential reputational damage as well if you are not being seen to be being purposely inclusive. So Emily, what steps can organisations take to ensure they're positioning themselves as an inclusive employer? Now, before you answer that question, what, in your view, are the 2 or 3 areas where this is properly manifesting itself?
As in, where is ageism manifesting?
Yeah, where is ageism? Sorry,
I mean,
and then we'll come on to
it manifests itself all over, right? Yeah. In terms of, it manifests itself in recruitment, it manifests itself in development opportunities, it manifests itself, again, really very much in terms of when people are trying to access reasonable adjustments to which they are legally entitled. That's one of the places that it really worries me that it comes in. And of course, it's compounded by other forms of marginalisation. It's compounded by sexism, it's compounded by racism. These can, you know, ageism can all feed everything else, but also you can be someone who's not from a kind of, you know, a marginalized community, but everyone's going to get old, and people, you know, can find themselves quite shocked when they experience ageism at these moments. And, you know, talking about the recruitment process specifically, you know, what we, when we've done research talking to people in this age cohort about their experience of going through the recruitment process, what we hear time and time again is people being told, you've just got a bit too much experience. Can you imagine? But again, you see that because we think that what we need is to train someone into a role that we can mold them into what we want. We all like that idea. I'm going to mold a worker into exactly what I want. But that's not the reality of the workforce. Actually, there's give and take, and you can learn things from someone who might have a really different viewpoint to you. In terms of what employers can do to try and tackle ageism, I'm going to give you a few highlights, but we've been working with employers for a really long time to design new ways to try and design out age bias from the recruitment process. This week on Tuesday, we launched our Good Recruitment Guide, Good Recruitment for Older Workers. If you Google that, you will find it. Maybe it will go in the chat, which gives you a guide to loads of different things you can do to all the different kind of aspects of the recruitment process, and some tools that you can use within your recruitment process to help design out age bias. And I think, you know, again, the thing that it won't surprise you to hear, it's true of all age-friendly employment practice, and it's true of, you know, recruitment as well, is that it's basically good inclusive recruitment practice. It's, you know, it's good inclusive recruitment practice. So let's talk about the job ad moment. Right now, we've done an experiment with, I think it was 1,500 people to kind of test out different language and job ads to see what kind of puts people off, what makes people think they're going to be included of different ages. There are a few things that you can do, a few words, and again, that's in the guide that is on our website. And what's really beneficial is that if you adapt your job ads to make them more appealing to older workers, our evidence shows it doesn't make them any less appealing to younger workers. Again, that's what's really important, right? It's about, you know, creating age inclusion within a broader inclusive recruitment strategy. So there's looking at your language and job ads. There's looking at your application forms. That's something else that you can do, right? You know, name blinding has become really popular. Gender blinding has become really popular in job applications to try and root out, gender bias, try and root out racism. You can't hide how much experience someone has in a CV, but actually what can happen is that often it gets harder for us to fill out job applications as we get older because we've just got so much to say. And actually that can make it harder, that can create age bias within the process because it can make it harder for the person who's sifting those applications. Because actually an application from someone who's got loads of experience can be a bit overwhelming, right? You know, and also make a really clear distinction. It makes it really obvious how old someone is. So one change that you can make in your application forms is don't ask people unless they want to. You can give people the option to put down every single job they've ever done. Ask people to put down the 4 or 5 most relevant jobs that they've done, right? And then you've got something more comparable. People are bringing their best and you can get a sense of what they're doing. So there's the application process. When it comes to interviews, you know, we all know about diverse interview panels and how important that is. The confidence point is key. And going back to something that Josie said, that, you know, it's that often what can happen is that as we get older, we spend longer before we move jobs. And going into a job interview when you haven't done it for a long time is incredibly scary and you don't know what to approach. And also, I would suggest that careers advice and guidance for young people is not great by any means at the moment, but it's maybe got a bit better. Just, you know, very much like just like how you do a job interview. So, and again, this is similar to, you know, if you're doing neurodiverse inclusive in recruitment, then you'll be doing this already and you should do it for all your workers. Tell people what to expect. This is what to expect in the interview. These are the kinds of things we're going to cover. This is what we think is in a good answer. And again, also that might, at that point, you want to give people a safe space to ask for any reasonable adjustments that they might need in the interview in a way that they know won't bias you against them. And again, we've got guidance within our Good Recruitment guide on how you can do that. And the other thing I'd say is like make those jobs when you advertise them. Don't just say flexible work considered. You've got to make it really clear these are the types of flexibility that we will offer and push yourself to be as flexible as possible.
Thank you. I would suggest that flexible working considered is a good start because we don't always see that either. And I'm extremely conscious about this kind of push back towards the workplace at the moment. We need to be asking ourselves, why are we doing this? And are we, whether it's deliberately or otherwise, we are therefore excluding populations and potential talent pools. I think we are setting up a whole load of trouble later on down the line. So yes, start with flexible working. And if you can, to all the points you say, be specific about it. And I think just, I've got a couple of questions I want to come to, but I think the comment around if you do this right, it benefits everybody. You know, thinking about purposeful inclusion, there are so many benefits that will come from that. Because there's a halo effect for anyone who is currently an underrepresented group. There's probably a reason behind that, and you know, you think you're talking to one group, but actually you end up reaching a whole wider group. And you do some brilliant work around that, Emily. We also have within Hays a fantastic division headed by Vasida Consulting that we've recently acquired, and it's come into the Hays family. It is one of the UK's leading D&I consultants with a fabulous team. So anyone who does want some support around, frankly, anything to do with DE&I, but for this conversation around really building a process that is robust and purposely inclusive, we are on hand to have a conversation. Just get in touch. Get in touch with me and I can direct you to the relevant person. So I want to pick up a question here. Interesting question here, I thought. About this kind of intergenerational piece where you're working with lots of people around you and obviously people bring their own biases and assumptions into the workplace. Question, what advice, and I'll put this to Emily, what advice do you have for older workers being able to bridge the intergenerational gap with younger colleagues, getting the best out of each other despite or because of differences in experiences, culture, expectations, etc.? So again, just in your experience, are there any kind of quick wins around that?
Yeah, I don't think there are quick wins around culture. It's just like, that's the thing, isn't it? It's, I think if you've got an organizational culture where people are quite siloed in their ages, that's a problem. And sometimes that can be shifted by friendly individuals who are good at speaking to each other. So, and you can make specific, social opportunities to do that, right? As an employer, you can try and create, where you've got working teams or working groups, try and make them as multi-generational as possible. Try and make sure that the social events that you've got aren't always things that feel quite age segregated, like it's not always a pub trip. It's, again, especially somebody who's got a care responsibility, they're not going to come to the pub after work. So that, kind of varying those kind of things. So you can do things to try and encourage that kind of exchange, and you've got to model it yourself. But I think I'm personally skeptical about all of this generation stuff that says, you need to do this for Gen Z, and you need to do this for millennials, and you need to do this for baby boomers, because I think it kind of boils us all down a little bit too much. So I think actually kind of like, letting go of some of that bit and just being open to just talking to your colleagues is the best way. So no silver bullets, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the danger when you look at diversity, equals difference, that you start going down certain strands and pillars, and actually really what we're trying to do is really focus on the end goal, which is inclusion, true inclusion. And I think a great starting point is talking and having conversations, with individuals, and also I think just organizationally, the skill of the manager to spot where there is perhaps unwitting exclusion or certain patterns of behavior, and kind of either calling it out or putting some adjustments in place that again are more purposely inclusive. Again, we're happy to support on any of that type of training and awareness, and I guess organizational design really and behavior. We spoke about ageism. Question: what should we do as a candidate if it's obvious that we're encountering ageism in the recruitment process? Emily?
I mean, my initial get out clause to this is that as an organisation, we don't work on support to individuals in that way, because it's tough. I mean, there is legal recourse to try and challenge ageism through tribunals. That's difficult. It is always worth flagging to the employers that, where you think that there's been a challenge. Ageism is against the law. There is you can challenge it through tribunal, but it is really difficult. But it's also worth noting that if you think that you have experienced ageism, you make sure that you tell other people that that this employer isn't somewhere that you think they'd be welcome, and then that's where they'll start feeling some pain.
Yeah, and certainly people do a lot of research on the likes of Glassdoor, and experiences work their way onto there, and it becomes reputational. So yeah, thank you for that. This probably is in your area of expertise, and this will be the last question we'll have. Do you think that managers need more training in age awareness, e.g. around the importance of continuing to have development conversations with older workers in the same way as they have with younger workers? So just the kind of coaching, I suppose, for that all important, really important managerial population who have a lot on their plates at the moment.
If this is the last question, can I also use it as an opportunity to say a little bit more about the Age Friendly Employer Pledge?
Definitely.
So for anyone who's interested in doing more on this, our Age Friendly Employer Pledge, which launched in November last year, is a commitment for employers who want to do better on the recruitment, retention, development of older workers. And employers who sign the pledge commit to taking one action every 12 months, so 12 months after signing and then 12 months after that, and telling us what it is. And we've got a range of different ideas and insights of things you can try around flex work, recruitment, culture, health support, career development. And we also run quarterly webinars, or sometimes more than quarterly, they're happening at the moment actually, for employers in our network to learn more about that. So I answered one of the questions with a link to the Age Friendly Employer Pledge. So do look, you can register your interest with no commitment. If you want to hear more, there's a link there's a kind of sign up form on that page. It's a free program nationwide. The other thing I would say, in answer to your question, is that as part of that, training for line managers is just critical, right? You know, the line managers are like right in the middle of all of this, making sure that line managers are trained in your health adjustments, making sure that line managers are trained in how to have a conversation around flexible working. And for that one specifically, we've got guidance on our website available to people who are pledge signers or not.
Fabulous. Lots of resources. We'll make sure we send that link round as well, Emily, together with the report that you mentioned that was published earlier on this week. So I'm going to draw it to a close. First of all, I would like to thank Emily and Josie for their insights. You've really enriched, I think, the conversation. The purpose of some of the surveys that we do is we shine a light on areas. We haven't got all the answers, but it starts a conversation. And this is a conversation, it's most definitely developing momentum, which is why you're saying, I'm doing lots of this stuff, this at the moment. There's a lot going on. There certainly is. We're seeing that from employers as well. I think sometimes there's an element of where do I start? So we're here to support, as is Emily and the team. Do just get in touch. As I said, a copy of this recording will be sent to everybody. Also, there'll be a survey. Of course, there's a survey to ask about how you found the webinar. We're quite keen to make sure that obviously we're on point in terms of topic and also the way in which we're conveying information to you. So please do fill that out and ping it back. We run these Insight webinars pretty much every month here at Hays. So you're now in our sites because you're on our mailing list if you weren't already. Please do come and join us for the next one. If we can support you in any way at all, please do get in touch either with your Hays contact or direct an inquiry into me, and I'll make sure I signpost it to the relevant person. Thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy your lunches when you have them and for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. So thank you, and we will see you again next time.